Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're taking on probably the largest, loudest, and you could argue the most influential family in modern wizarding history, the Weasleys. For most of us, when you hear that name, you kind of conjure up this image of chaos, right? Red hair, hand-me-down robes, and this group of loyal, maybe slightly overwhelming allies to Harry Potter.
Which is just a huge disservice to them, really. Our mission today is to go far beyond that common perception, beyond Ron being the sidekick or Molly's fantastic cooking, and truly uncover the sheer depth of Arthur, Molly, and all 7 of their incredibly unique children.
Right.
When you look at the breadth of source material we have, notes, interviews, all the background lore, it's so clear the films barely even scratch the surface of their individual lives, their personalities, their careers after Hogwarts, and I think most importantly, their moral impact on the entire wizarding world.
Exactly. We're dealing with a massive amount of material on a family that essentially served as the foundational bedrock for the entire resistance against Lord Voldemort. And the first, most crucial thing we have to remember about the Weasleys is that they are a pureblood family who openly and often just rejected pureblood mania. They chose tolerance, compassion, acceptance. And in doing that, they earned that scornful label of blood traitors from families like the Malfoys and that whole conservative side of society.
And that label, blood traitor, it wasn't just an insult. It was a core concept that shaped the trajectory of every single one of those children. It meant they were actively choosing poverty, choosing to be ostracized, all in favor of principle. It's what differentiated the Weasleys from almost every other pureblood house in Britain, and it dictated their paths, their relationships, and their ultimate roles in the war.
So let's unpack this, starting right at the foundation. The matriarch and patriarch, Arthur and Molly, and the powerful and often tragic legacy that anchors their home, the Burrow.
Okay, so Arthur Weasley was one of 3 boys. What's fascinating about his lineage, and a lot of people miss this, is that his mother, Cedrella, was actually from the ancient House of Black. Yeah, but she was disowned. Burned right off the family tapestry for marrying Arthur's father, Septimus, who was considered a blood traitor because of the family's liberal stance on Muggles. So Arthur comes from a long line of choosing moral principle over status.
That just sets the stage for everything, doesn't it? Arthur worked in the Ministry of Magic in the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office. Now, his son Percy, who was so obsessed with status, clearly felt this job had, no worth. But Arthur had this deep, almost childlike fascination with Muggle technology.
He collected plugs, batteries, rubber ducks. He saw magic in the mundane.
Right.
And this leads to this incredible layered irony. Here is a man enforcing a law designed to prevent the enchantment of Muggle items, who was at the same time bewitching his own flying Ford Anglia.
Because how do you get away with that?
Well, our sources confirm that Arthur, being this kind of mischievous idealist, was able to get away with it because he wrote the law itself. He put a loophole in there that he could exploit.
That's amazing. I wonder about that decision, though. Is that a perfect example of Weasley idealism versus policy? Here's a man who enforces order but wrote the law specifically so he could get around it.
Yeah.
Does that maybe suggest a certain naivete or even a distraction from how serious his job was? Was his personal fascination ever a weakness for the order?
I think it's more of a radical freedom. He adheres to the spirit of the law, which is about protecting the statute of secrecy, but he prioritizes curiosity, and personal freedom. That tension between order and freedom is the fundamental principle we see echoed in all children.
That's a great point.
I mean, think of Fred and George rejecting rules entirely versus Percy clinging to them blindly. Arthur basically defined the whole spectrum.
Okay, so let's move to Molly, the matriarch. She was a Prewit, the only girl of 3. Her brothers were Fabian and Gideon Prewit. And Arthur and Molly met at Hogwarts, both sorted into Gryffindor in the early 60s. We have this wonderful little anecdote about their courtship. They got caught on a nighttime stroll at 4 a.m. by the caretaker at the time, Apollyon Pringle.
So they had that streak of youthful rebellion even then.
Exactly.
What's fascinating here, though, is the generational shift when it comes to the First Wizarding War. While Bill and Charlie were being born, right in the height of Voldemort's first reign of terror, Arthur and Molly made a conscious, defining choice. They opted not to join the original Order of the Phoenix.
Right. They chose to focus on starting a family.
An impossible task, starting a large family amidst that terror. They prioritized their children's immediate safety and stability over direct frontline activism.
But the shadow of the war was still immense because of Molly's family. Her brothers, Fabian and Gideon, were heavily involved in the order. And their story is it's brutally tragic.
It is. They were killed by 5 Death Eaters. The sources are quick to point out, though, that they fought like heroes. That loss must have just deeply scarred Molly and colored her whole view of war and family.
It absolutely had to. It provides the crucial context for Molly's intense protectiveness, her sometimes overwhelming fear for her children's safety during the Second War.
Right. That loss, the loss of 2 brothers who fought valiant, is the painful origin of... We know Molly rarely talked about their deaths, but we see how significant it was when she passes down Fabian's watch to Harry when he comes of age at 17. It's a literal lineage of heroism passed through pain and loss. It's her recognition that Harry was now effectively the 8th son.
And that action connects their fight in the Second War directly back to the first, linking that past trauma to the present. Okay, so let's look at the physical manifestation of their life, the burrow.
The burrow is just. It's a physical manifestation of their values, isn't it? Chaotic, welcoming, unconventional, and held together by sheer willpower and magic. It's described as looking like it had once been a large stone pigpen, with extra crooked rooms just added on haphazard.
So it looked like it was literally held up by magic.
Exactly. The sheer impossibility of the structure reflects the impossibility of their circumstances.
And despite the chaos and the lack of fun, Molly was deeply intentional about their basic education. She taught all 7 kids the fundamentals: reading, writing, simple math, before they ever set foot in Hogwarts.
Emphasizing the importance of education regardless of their finance.
But the struggle was relentless. They were very poor, and the size of the family was the source of constant financial issues.
And that reality led directly to the tradition that defined Ron's entire childhood, the hand-me-down. Everyone except the eldest son, Bill, inherited everything. Clothes, wands, books, even pets.
Right. This constant material deficiency played such a crucial role in shaping Ron and Percy's psychological paths, didn't it? It fueled Ron's insecurity and Percy's relentless ambition.
Absolutely. And you just have to look at the sheer logistical feat of this family. We have Bill in 1970, Charlie in 72, Percy in 76, the April 1st twins, Fred and George in 78, Ron in 1980, and then finally Ginny in 1981. That is 7 children in 11 years.
It's incredible.
And the birth order and temperament are everything here. It dictated their possessions, their nicknames, often their personal development. The sources even point out a physical contrast. Charlie, Fred, and George were shorter and stockier, whereas Percy and Ron were long and lanky.
Which sort of cemented some of the psychological distinctions, right? The stockier ones leaning toward physical activity and pranks, while the lankier ones struggled more with physical confidence.
Yeah, and it really highlights Ron's position as the 6th son, just constantly defined by what the other 6 are doing.
So the table is set. High moral values from the Prewitts and the disowned Cinderella Black. Low funds from choosing principle over wealth, and a legacy of sacrifice. Let's move on to the first 2 sons, Bill and Charlie, who set the standard for achievement, but in a wildly non-traditional way.
Bill Weasley, the eldest, he really defied expectation. He set a standard of academic excellence that Percy later copied, but never truly grasped the spirit.
Right.
Bill was an academic powerhouse, prefect in his 5th year, head boy in his 7th. He took a staggering 12 OWLs and scored exceptionally high on his end. He was set up for success in any high-status ministry department.
But unlike Percy, who mirrored those scores, Bill was known for being really cool. He was the rule-breaking academic.
Exactly. He had grown out his bright red hair, tied it back in a ponytail, he wore clothes fit for a rock concert, and sported a fang earring that, of course, Molly deeply disapproved of.
The perfect mix of high-achieving conformists in the classroom and rebellious nonconformists everywhere else.
And that contradictory style translated directly to his career path, Gringotts Cursebreaker. And we need to pause here and define what that job actually... It wasn't academic desk work.
No, not at all.
It was high-level, advanced, ancient magic mixed with forensic archaeology. His work involved going through dangerous, cursed locations, tombs, deserts, caves, to find and remove powerful curses protecting treasure trove. It required immense knowledge, immense courage, and physical resilience.
That is a visceral job description.
Yeah.
We have some incredibly vivid anecdotes from that time, don't we? When the family visited him in Egypt, Bill actually showed them mutated Muggle skeletons, victims who'd grown extra limbs and heads from stepping on a curse. He was hired to neutralize. That's a visceral image of the danger he faced daily. He wasn't just removing old objects, he was diffusing magical time.
And that dangerous work brought him into deep contact with the goblins who run Gringotts, who are often portrayed as inherently suspicious and difficult to deal with. Bill learned very quickly that goblins were not to be trusted or lied to because of a historical millennia-old hatred of wizards that runs far deeper than any current politics. This insight adds a layer of complexity to the family's tolerance. Bill understood people, but he also understood deep-seated cultural mistrust.
Which became so valuable during the Second War. When Voldemort returned, Bill took a less exciting desk job back in London so he could help the Order. And his specific task was to use his connections and his knowledge to try to persuade the goblins to join the cause.
Right. He worked tirelessly, but ultimately failed because the goblins refused to take sides in what they saw as a civil war.
But his failure wasn't due to a lack of effort, it was just the immense weight of history.
Exactly. But the point is, Bill used his position, his knowledge, and his high intelligence not to climb a ministry ladder, but to facilitate high-risk, high-adventure work and later crucial intelligence gathering for...
Okay, now we move to Charlie, the quintessential outdoorsman, the second son, who chose a path defined entirely by passion. Charlie shared his love for magical creatures with Hagrid and was shorter and stocked like the twin. His physical appearance matched his career. His arms were muscular and weather-beaten from spending so much time outside, with all these shiny burns from working with wild dragons.
He was a genuine Hogwarts legend, but his legend was forged on the Quidditch. He was an incredible seeker, considered the best Hogwarts had seen in many years. He became captain and led Gryffindor to the Quidditch.
And we see that direct familial link when his old wand was passed down to Ron, which is such a symbolic gesture, linking Ron to a legacy of Quidditch excellence that he felt immense pressure to live up to.
And his career choice is the real point of divergence for the entire family. He was so good, he could have easily played professionally for national, but he turned down conventional glory and success to go to Romania to study and work with dragons.
Which deeply disgusted his former team captain, Oliver Wood, who lamented that Charlie had run off chasing dragons.
But this is the key to understanding the Weasley principle. Charlie prioritized a messy, dangerous, unglamorous passion working with wild animals over celebrity, status, and wealth. He chose adventure over fame.
That's a perfect encapsulation of Arthur and Molly's underlying values, isn't it? It's not about what looks good on paper, it's about finding meaning in the work.
Precisely. Though he wasn't always flawless, we learned he failed his first apparition test, landing 5 miles south of his target and right on top of some poor old woman who was doing her shop.
A moment of classic, endearing Weasley mishap that reminds us even the heroes are prone to clumsy mistakes.
And his role in the Second War was also, Dumbledore told Charlie to stay in Romania. His mission wasn't frontline combat. It was to use his expertise in international context to develop quiet, critical intelligence gathering networks for the Order in Europe.
And his love for dragons led to 2 essential narrative moments. First, helping Ron secretly arrange the transport of Hagrid's illegal dragon, Norbert.
Using his friends to pick it up at the tallest tower at midnight, yeah.
And second, he supplied and tamed the 4 breeding dragons for the Triwizard Tournament, including the fearsome Hungarian Horntail.
And he later corrected Hagrid, revealing that Norbert was actually a female, Norberta, explaining that the females were more vicious, which is a small detail that just speaks volumes about his expertise and his respect for the animals.
Charlie's story is defined by a choice for adventure and passion over status, which leads us to the son who chose the exact opposite path, Percy.
This is where the core tension within the family really emerges, and it's so deeply rooted in the family's poverty. Percy was fundamentally driven by status and this desperate need for respectability. Unlike his siblings, he was profoundly embarrassed by the family's financial struggle. He saw it as a barrier to his ultimate, almost fanatical goal, becoming the Minister of Magic.
He saw success and a high-ranking future as the only way to escape the shame of those hand-me-downs, so he worked relentlessly for it. He was a pure academic, top marks in every single class. He became prefect in 5th year, a huge family moment, rewarded with new robes and a new owl, Hermie, and topped it by becoming head boy in 7th year.
But here's the distinction between Bill and Percy. Bill wore his excellence. Percy wore his like a shield and a badge. He constantly bragged about these achievements, earning the deep annoyance of his entire family, especially the twins, who just saw his ambition as pompous, self-important.
And he desperately tried to maintain that respectable facade. He dated the Ravenclaw prefect, Penelope Clearwater, but kept it a secret precisely to avoid the twins' teasing. It shows his image was more important than sharing his happiness with his family.
That facade, however, was shattered when Penelope was petrified during the Chamber of Secrets. He was horror-struck and devastated, sitting pale and stunned in the common. It shows his ambition hadn't fully eroded his humanity. He was capable of deep.
But the ministry obsession really consumed him after graduation. He joined the Department of International Magical Cooperation, working under the deeply conservative Barty Crouch Sr. His devotion was just extreme. He'd apparate downstairs every morning at the Burrow, demanding his own room for worthless tasks he deemed critical.
The sources detail one such task, and it is the perfect symbol of his misplaced ambition. Compile filing a report on standardizing cauldron thickness.
Right.
He took this completely seriously, believing he was performing vital, high-level administrative work, while everyone else in the family saw the absurdity and the pointlessness of his self.
And this obsession led to the absolute breaking point. After the Crouch Sr. incident, Percy received a rapid, suspicious promotion as junior assistant to the minister, Cornelius Fudge.
Yeah, and Arthur immediately suspected and told the family that this was a clear political ploy by Fudge to spy on the Weasleys because of their closeness to Dumbledore and Harry.
And that accusation triggered the fight that tore the family apart in Order of the Phoenix. Percy lashed out with immense personal cruelty, accusing Arthur of having no ambition, a lousy reputation, and being an idiot for supporting Dumbledore and Harry.
Just brutal. He declared his loyalty was with the ministry, not his family, and tragically, he slammed the door in Molly's face when she later tried to reconcile, just solidifying the betrayal.
It's one thing to have a career disagreement, but to attack your father for his lack of ambition, well, then that lack is actually a choice of principle over money. That suggests his ambition had become a moral failure. How could he possibly justify that level of personal cruelty in his mind, knowing how hard his parents...
Because he needed to justify his choice to himself. If he admitted his parents were right, his entire life structure and his sense of self-worth collapsed. He chose the lie of ministry of messy, challenging filial love.
And the reaction at home was visceral. Arthur started breaking things, and Molly cried often, forcing the family to just stop saying Percy's name to cope with the pain.
And Percy only amplified the cold. He took notes at Harry's expulsion trial and ignored his father entirely. He even wrote a venomous letter to Ron advising him, now a prefect, to align with Umbridge and shun Harry to secure his own future.
A complete betrayal, fueled by pride and a refusal to admit he was wrong, even after Fudge was sacked and Dumbledore was proven.
Yeah, even the new minister, Rufus Scrimgeour, tried to use Percy as a prop, forcing him to visit the Burrow at Christmas to try and get information on Harry. The sight of Percy caused an immediate Fred, George, and Ginny threw food at him, and he stormed out, leaving Molly in tears. The cost of his pride was immense, both to himself and to...
The reconciliation is one of the most powerful moments in the entire war narrative. It happened only during the Battle of Hogwarts when Aberforth Dumbledore contacted him. He arrived at the castle, realized he was surrounded by his entire family fighting to the death for a cause he had mocked, and overwhelmed, he just blurted out the full confession.
He admitted he was a fool, a pompous prat, and a ministry-loving, family-disowning, power-hungry moron. The self-loathing was so complete it was redemptive. Fred immediately stuck out his hand to his older brother, and Percy, looking at his father, the one he had fought with the worst, said he was sorry.
And Arthur immediately ran in and hugged him, achieving that necessary reconciliation forged under fire.
And in a wonderful moment of relief, Percy made his first joke in years while dueling the incurster Pies Thick. Percy dramatically declared, "I resign," right as Thick Hood.
And Fred screamed out laughing, joyously telling Percy that he hadn't heard him joke since.
And then, in the cruelest twist of fate, the wall next to them exploded. Fred died. The reconciliation was shattered in literally the next second. Percy, who had just spent years in isolation fueled by pride, had just lost the chance to make up for all that
He was left completely unable to move away from Fred's body, shielding him from further harm, just overwhelmed by grief and the crushing guilt over the time he had lost. It's an unbearably painful narrative arc for Percy, who paid a profound price for his ambition.
The shame of Percy's ambition is starkly contrasted by the two sons who chose to embrace true anarchy and reject entire Fred and George, and the youngest son, Ron, whose life was dominated by insecurity stemming from being perpetually in the shadow of his sick sibling.
Ron's life story is one long fight for recognition. Bill was the academic star and head boy. Charlie was the Quidditch legend. Percy was the smart, driven prefect and head boy. Fred and George were the hilarious, successful entrepreneurs. Even Ginny became the attractive, powerful witch. Ron constantly felt inferior, defined by his status as the youngest boy.
And his early life was dominated by secondhand possessions, which, while practical, constantly reinforced his lack of individual identity. Hand-me-down robes, hand-me-down books, Scabbers the rat, who turned out to be Peter Pettigrew, his old wand, and those utterly embarrassing homemade corn.
He even developed his crippling arachnophobia when he was only 5 years old after Fred turned his teddy bear into a giant spider as a prank. That seemingly innocent childhood joke left Ron with a lifelong debilitating fear, showing the lasting psychological impact of the twins' anarchic humor.
And the ultimate expression of this deep-seated insecurity is seen in the mirror of arrest. When Ron looked into it, he didn't see a happy family. He saw himself standing alone, head boy, holding both the Quidditch cup and the house cup.
Right.
This wasn't a vision of familial contentment. It was a direct, desperate manifestation of his longing to match the external achievements of Bill and Charlie, to prove his worth independent of Harry.
His Quidditch arc captures this perfectly. He makes the team his keeper, but his confidence is shot. He struggles immensely, leading to the infamous Slytherin chant, "Weasley is our king."
Yeah, that chant was designed specifically to undermine his self-worth, and it worked. He let in 4 goals in one match due to sheer panic.
But he eventually succeeds after Harry fakes giving him liquid luck. Ron played incredible, saving shot after shot, leading Gryffindor to victory. And the brilliant twist is that the Gryffindors adopted the "Weasley is our king" chant as their own triumphant anthem. Ron was carried on their shoulders holding up the cup.
The source notes this was the happiest he had been in a long time, having finally stepped out of the shadow, even if he briefly believed he had cheated to get.
His romantic life also suffered from this deep insecurity. He was furious and jealous of Hermione going with Victor Crumb to the Yule Ball, leading him to unwisely ask Fleur Delacour, the part violet, to the ball, embarrassing himself horribly.
And his disastrous relationship with Lavender Brown was purely reactive. He kissed her immediately after seeing Hermione and Crumb, using Lavender to make Hermione jealous, demonstrating a lack of emotional maturity rooted in low.
And here is where the Deluminator becomes truly symbolic. During the hunt for Horcrux, Ron, struggling under the influence of the locket, briefly abandons his friend. The locket amplified his deepest fear, being unwanted, being inferior to Harry, suggesting Hermione loved Harry like a brother, but loved Harry more.
He was broken by his own perceived failure, but his return was guided by the Deluminator Dumbledore left him. Ron realized it acted as a homing device. It only produced a ball of light after he heard snippets of Harry and Hermione mentioning his name while he was far away.
So the device essentially told him, you aren't a shadow. You are inherently needed to complete this task.
The fact that Dumbledore left him a device that pulls light and sound from across vast distance specifically to guide him after hearing his friend is Dumbledore's final declaration that Ron possesses an internal compass for loyalty that is just as vital as Harry's courage. It guided him right back to them, allowing him to save Harry and, importantly, destroy the Horcrux that had magnified himself.
Now let's move to Fred and George, the true anarchic entrepreneurs, born perfectly on April 1st. They were the two sons who weaponized humor and chaos. They were shorter and stockier like Charlie, and their life was a series of glorious and sometimes painful pranks.
Indeed painful. We mentioned the spider phobia prank, but their chaos sometimes crossed into darker magic. They tried to make 5-year-old Ron take an unbreakable vow, an incident that provoked a rare fury in Arthur, who rushed home and administered a severe talk.
And Fred gave 7-year-old Ron an acid pop that burned a hole through his tongue, leading Molly to hit him with a broomstick, showing the limits of her tolerance for their danger.
And their refusal to conform cost them financially long before they became successful. They were cut out of Aunt Muriel's will entirely after they set off a dung bomb under her chair at Christmas. They prioritized a gag over potential inheritance. That's true Weasley principle right there.
They became Hogwarts legends, not just for pranks, but for physical prowess. They played beaters for 4 years, helping win the Quidditch Cup in their 6th year. But the key to their legend was the Marauders map. They stole it from Filch's office in their 1st year.
And the sources confirm a beautiful detail about how they cracked the password. Rowling explained that the map knew they were up to no good and helped them by flickering into life as they got closer to the necessary phrase, until they finally said, I solemnly swear that I'm up to no.
The map recognized and responded to their inherent.
Their pranks were legendary and often carry profound implications. They famously bewitched snowballs to follow Professor Quirrell around in Philosopher's Stone, meaning they were unknowingly throwing snowballs directly into Voldemort's face. They tested their Tauntaun toffee on Dud, causing his tongue to swell up to 4 feet. They were testing the boundaries of magic and decorum constantly.
Weasley's Wizard Wheezes began in earnest with Harry's Tree Wizard Tournament prize money, 1,000 galleon, which Harry gave them as a jumpstart. They ran a booming mail-order business, testing their products known as skeeving snack box constantly on themselves.
These included puking pastels, nosebleed nougats, and the instant darkness pouch. The twins reassured Hermione that they had already done the bulk of testing on themselves to ensure the products were safe enough for customers, despite the consequences, like the fever fudge causing massive pus-filled boils. Their entrepreneurial spirit was built on self-sacrifice and slate magic.
The Great Exit remains one of the most satisfying moments in the series, and a massive act of defiance against the Ministry's attempt to control Hogwarts. They dropped out during Umbridge's reign, causing absolute chaos by setting off an enormous parade of enchanted fireworks. turning a corridor into a literal swamp and flying off on their brooms to a huge applause.
And their final immortal instruction to Peeves, the poltergeist, was simply, give her hell from us.
And the business boomed. They moved into a flat above the shop, bought fine dragon skin jackets, a symbol of their wealth achieved on their own unconventional terms, a massive middle finger to Percy's ministry obsession.
Even the Ministry of Magic, in a darkly ironic twist, bought 500 of their shield hats for their workers.
But the war cost everyone, including the Maverick. During the Battle of the Seven Potters, George was hit by Snape's Sectum Sempra curse. This curse, a piece of dark magic, sliced his ear off permanently. That injury couldn't be healed and served as a lasting physical scar of the war.
And of course, the ultimate price was Fred, killed instantly by an explosion right after he laughed at Percy's long-awaited redemption. That timing makes the loss so profoundly tragic, a moment of joy immediately followed by absolute devastation.
George struggled immensely with that loss. He mourned his twin, his partner in crime, his other half. It was a grief that fundamentally changed, but he kept the joke shop open, honoring Fred's legacy, later aided by Ron.
Yeah. George went on to marry Angelina Johnson, who had been Fred's date to the Yule Ball, and they named their first son Fred Weasley II, ensuring the laughter and spirit of his twin lived on. Beautiful but painful.
Okay, so we've saved Ginny, the youngest and only sister, for last, because her arc is perhaps the most transformative. Moving from a shy, overwhelmed child to a powerful, confident witch trajectory that defines the potential of the entire Weasley family.
Absolutely.
Ginny grew up sneaking into the family broom shed at age 6 to practice flying with all 7 of her brother's brooms. She developed incredible Quidditch skills by essentially teaching herself, which explains her later proficiency in speed.
Her introduction to Harry was marked by extreme shyness. She was prone to knocking things over whenever he was around, barely speak to him, completely paralyzed by her crush. But she first spoke up in front of him to defend him from Malfoy in Diagon Alley, a crucial early moment showing her fierce protective spirit even more.
That initial shyness, however, was quickly exploited. Lucius Malfoy slipped Tom Riddle's diary, a Horcrux, into her secondhand book. She confided in it about her crush on Harry, her brother's teasing, and her secondhand clothes. The fragment of Voldemort's soul possessed her.
And she was used to open the Chamber of Secrets, petrify students, and, chillingly, slaughter all the roosters on the grounds because she instinctively knew that their crowing was a known threat to the basilisk. That psychological trauma of being used as a weapon is just...
Harry saved, destroying the Horcrux, but the incident deeply traumatized her. Crucially, though, Ginny used that trauma to help Harry later. When Harry feared he was being possessed by Voldemort's connection, Ginny confronted him.
Right, she said, I didn't want anyone to talk to me. Well, that was a bit stupid of you, seeing as you don't know anyone but me who's been possessed by you.
Such a powerful line.
It was an aha moment for Harry and a moment of profound growth for Ginny. She convinced him that his connection to Voldemort was different from possession and helped him realize he needed to talk about it. Having moved past that trauma, she transformed complete, gaining confidence.
She excelled in Dumbledore's arm, earning a reputation for her highly effective Bat Bogey Hex, a unique and powerful piece of magic, which impressed Slughorn enough to earn her an invitation to his exclusive Slug Club. She was becoming a serious, formidable wit.
And she became an excellent Quidditch chaser and seeker, filling Harry's spot during his ban. And she dated. She dated Michael Corner and dumped him because he complained about her winning a Quidditch match against his house Ravenclaw.
Again, showing her prioritization of passion over a partner's fragile ego. Then she dated.
And the irony is that by acting like a normal, independent person, dating others, she finally broke the spell of the shy crush, which, ironically, is what made Harry finally notice her. She was no longer defined by her feelings for him, but by her own identity.
The moment she and Harry finally got together was after Gryffindor won the Quidditch Cup. Harry, filled with happiness and feeling the true freedom of the moment, ran into the common room, passionately kissed Ginny in front of everyone.
And Ron, who was shocked, eventually gave a tiny jerk of his head that said, well, if you must, that's the ultimate brotherly acceptance.
But their relationship was immediately sacrificed. Harry initiated a painful breakup at Dumbledore's funeral, fearing Voldemort would use her again. Ginny's response showed immense maturity and strength. She didn't cry or beg, but powerfully challenged his noble sacrifice, saying, I care. I never really gave up on you. Not really. Maybe that's why I like you so.
She understood he had to hunt Voldemort, but she still let him know the immense personal cost of his choice. She didn't allow him to be self-martyring. She met his noble sacrifice with her own quiet.
They reunited immediately after the war, once Harry's mission was complete. Ginny had fought fiercely in the Battle of Hogwarts, even facing Bellatrix Lestrange with Hermione and Luna, until Molly stepped in to protect her daughter from a killing curse that narrowly missed. Post-war, Ginny first became a professional Quidditch player, a testament to her early passion in the broom shed before retiring to become the senior Quidditch correspondent for the Daily Prophet.
So the war, even in victory, it left scars and defined the final paths of the Weasley children. Let's start with the immediate aftermath of Bill's mauling. Bill was attacked by the werewolf Fenrir Greyback during the Battle of the Astronomy Tower.
Right.
While Greyback wasn't transformed, the wounds were cursed and permanent. His face was badly slashed, and he gained a lifelong liking for rare steak.
Molly was devastated, crying that he was always so handsome and now couldn't get married. But Fleur Delacour, who Molly and Ginny had originally disliked because they thought Bill's attraction was only physical, stepped up in a defining moment.
She did. Fleur fiercely declared she would still marry, saying the scars only showed her husband brave. That moment finally earned Molly's complete and unconditional acceptance.
Their beautiful wedding was later crashed by Death Eaters after the Ministry fell, symbolizing that the war was far from over, forcing the family into hiding immediately following a moment of great joy. This emotional volatility just defined the sacrifice.
This leads us back to the ultimate cost of victory, which rests with the loss of his twin, Fred. Laughing moments before the explosion was unbearable. George mourned deep, dealing with the profound, almost literal loss of half of himself. But he kept the joke shop open, realizing that honoring Fred's legacy meant preserving the laughter and defiance they created.
So George's act of keeping the shop running wasn't just business, it was a lifelong tribute.
He later married Angelina Johnson, who had been Fred's date to the Yule Ball, showing a deep connection to their shared past, and naming his first son Fred II, ensuring the twins' memory lived on, not as a ghost, but as a new.
The rest of the family established new lives, defined by the values instilled by Arthur and Molly. Ron, interestingly, did not finish his 7th year. He revolutionized the Auror department with Harry for 2 years, but ultimately he left that glory, the high status, the excitement, the fame, to help George run Weasley's Wizard Week.
That decision by Ron, after spending his entire life trying to step out of the shadow and gain status, he deliberately chose a messy, unconventional career that prioritized family and memory over the conventional glory of being an Auror alongside Harry Potter. He married Hermione, and they had 2 children, Rose.
Percy, having fully repented and learned the true value of loyalty, returned to the ministry and quickly rose in prominence, but this time for genuine merit and integrity. He became a high-ranking official in the Department of Magical Transportation under the new minister, Kingsley Shacklebolt. He married a woman named Audrey and had 2 daughters, Molly and Lucy.
Bill returned to his life as a curse breaker with Fleur, and they had 3 children, Victoire, Dominique, and Luke. He continued his adventurous, high-risk work, proving that principle and passion were more important than settling for a safe, high status.
And Charlie, interestingly, never married or had children. Our sources suggest this was a conscious choice due to his demanding and dangerous work with dragons. He felt he couldn't risk leaving children fatherless, especially after seeing the raw, immediate pain of Fred's death. He chose dedication to his passion over settling.
So if we look at the Weasley family as a whole, their lives are defined not by the poverty or the low social standing that plagued Ron and Percy, but by their unwavering. Despite the temptations of status and wealth, they consistently chose passion, loyalty, and principle, resulting in immense personal victories alongside the most profound of personal loss. Their story is the ultimate proof that status.
It's truly incredible to see the full picture. Bill, the academic with a rock star edge. Percy, the prodigal son redeemed only at the last moment of his brother's life. Ron, the insecure shadow who found his own light by choosing family. The twins, the anarchic heart of the resistance. And Ginny, who transformed her trauma into extraordinary personal power. They were not just support, they were the essential, enduring moral force that allowed the wizarding world to win.
Absolutely. Think about the enduring path they forged, always choosing the unconventional road.
Which leaves us with one final thought for you to consider as you wrap up. Given Charlie's initial prioritize the danger and adventure of drag, high status professional, and Ginny's eventual return to professional Quidditch half for settle, what does the Weasley family's repeated prioritization of personal, sometimes messy, conventional high status glory say about character and the lessons Arthur and Molly ultimately still is the ability to choose conventional path, the defining characteristic of heroine in the